Hey everybody, it's Garrett Monroe from the Tabletop EDU podcast. I'm joined as usual with the mighty Dr. Cullinan
Hello.
and also the great Adam Watson for the first time. Hello and welcome.
Hello, and thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Oh yes, we're excited to have you. And I've ran into some of your work across different platforms, namely LinkedIn. And in doing some desk research, I kind of get notifications whenever new publications are coming out about tabletop RPGs and teaching and learning. And I saw you have a book. Is it from McFarland? You've got a book coming out
That's
called
correct.
Tabletop Role-Playing Games in the Classroom.
I'm
Yes.
so excited to talk to you about this game or this
Yes,
whole
yes.
thing. It's awesome.
Well, thank you. Yes, Tabletop Role-Playing Games, Infusing Gameplay into K-12 Instruction, full name, is coming out. It's a little squishy. It should be at the end. Actually, I got an email just yesterday from my publisher. It looks like it's going to be end of this month, beginning of next. I just keep saying late 2025. So not too long after probably this hits the airwaves, as it were. It should be out very, very soon.
Exciting. And tell us, what are some of the big ideas that you like to unpack with talking about tabletop RPGs in the classroom?
Big question. Um,
Or
one
where would
thing
you?
I think,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Oh no, sorry. Yeah, where would you start with it?
Well, I think the first thing that I recognize, and this is a little bit of my history, is that I am a public school K through 12 educator. I was a high school English teacher for about 9 years, and then I was a district digital learning coordinator position, and then now I'm an educational cooperative called OVEC, the Ohio Valley Educational Cooperative, where I'm a digital learning consultant. So a lot of digital learning points along those adventures in public school education. But in my heart, definitely, I think of the classroom teacher and the classroom teaching experience I had. I say all that to say that I think one of the things that drove me from the very early parts of researching, curating, and finding stories about tabletop role playing games in the classroom and then ultimately writing the book is practicality and pragmatism. It really was important for me that not only did I find and capture and celebrate stories of teachers that are actually really doing it, whether it's elemental or aspect of tabletop role playing games or the full course is infused with it, as it were, and somewhere in between. Whether it's an example or celebrating a story of an educator doing that, or giving examples of, or in my book, even frameworks to help articulate where are you at in that journey and how could you implement that in your classroom. That was really, it's how to make the rubber hit the road, as it were, right? It's just really important that it becomes practical and not too highly theoretical. It has research and evidence, but not in a sense where it just feels like it's a bunch of things in parentheses and names and page numbers. And so, what am I supposed to do with that in third period, kind of thing? So
Right.
that was probably one of the major aspects thinking going forward with it, with my journey, but also with the book.
Yeah, yeah. How do you, well, you've worked, so it sounds like you've done a lot of work with K-12 educators, really practical stuff. And so um, I have the habit of making, I love the theory and I love the research and I love getting into talking about that. And I could, as an instructional designer, I could riff on this stuff, in the abstract all day, and I enjoy that. But Maryanne does a good job of kind of keeping me grounded. And so that's
It's
Thank
a
you,
that's
Maryanne.
full-time job. It's my third job.
It's just, is it a paid job? That's the
No.
important part of it. Can we incentivize and financial this? Yeah. Okay.
Precisely. Well, what do you think? Well, that's super exciting. Yeah, there's been a lot of talk. This has become a thing now. There's almost a movement. There's a groundswell of people talking about really excited to bring tabletop role-playing games into the classrooms, particularly in K-12. Yeah, I think one of the reasons it's so exciting is because we see a lot of students get turned on by it, and so there's a pop culture moment right now where young
Well,
people are playing it,
I
and
think,
so yeah.
Adam, I don't know if you found this, but in all the research that I've done, you have to do research on the people you can do research on, right? And so a lot of the research that I found out there is actually on undergrads and graduate students. And there is very little academic research out there that is on the K-12 population. And so some of the research that I've done has been on my middle school students just to try to get some of that very basic information out there. The questions I want to ask, at first I had to back way up because the questions I needed to ask were some of the very basic things like, does this help kids? And do
Right.
people across settings find the same things? Because not all of that has been out there. And so it's really
Yeah.
exciting to see there start to be more research being done and people who are interested in collecting that research into one place so that it's useful.
It's definitely nascent of, K through 12 tabletop role playing game education research is not probably something that has a think tank and six-figure grants behind it quite yet. I think that it's something that if you know and look and find and search, you can find either aspects that inform it, which is certainly, multiple opportunities in my book was looking on the margins of, for example, how's tabletop role playing game helped with therapy and case studies and white papers to go with that, for example. And certainly you can pull from that applicable aspects that could work really well or be important in a K through 12 classroom. But you're absolutely right. It's not like there are deep, long, longitudinal studies of, a person did this thing compared to, third period versus fifth period. I would love to see more of that. But it does live a lot in the anecdotal. There are some aspects, though. I mean, I've found some things where it's like, hey, there you go. There's an actual classroom, and they did some data, but it's hard. I
Yeah.
hope that changes.
Well, and for anyone listening, to pull back the curtain a little bit, to do academic research, you have to go through an internal review board that is all about making sure that the ethics behind the research, right? We don't want to research on children in any way that's going to harm them,
Right.
or anyone in a way that's going to harm them. If you took intro to psychology, you probably learned about the time that scientists taught a kid to be afraid of a rabbit and then they couldn't make him unafraid of the rabbit again, right? We don't do that.
Whoops.
We don't do that
Yeah.
anymore. That's frowned upon. And so it's very challenging to get access to people in the K through 12, students in the K through 12 system, unless you're already part of that system. And
Absolutely.
so, um,
That's one thing that I hoped to have for the book, but also just in general to boot back for a second, to punt back for a second.
yeah.
Um, when I was curious about the sphere of education, the potential and possibility of tabletop role playing games in education, one of the things was finding bits and pieces, other websites and other people that were doing it. So I want to make that clear, including the two people on this podcast. It's not like I pretended that it wasn't existing, but one of the things that was hard for me is thinking through the K through 12 educator of pulling relevant and curating pieces that would help, right?
Mhm.
So I started in that journey, but then I would find some here and there, and it was like I just need to put it somewhere. Where will that be? And I wish there was a website that was perfect in the K through 12 instructional space that ... And finally, I realized, it's kind of if be the change you want to see in the world, which sounds lofty, I suppose. But at the end of the day, it's like, you know what, I can make a template and throw something on HTML too. So I did. And that's really the genesis of the Kentucky Educators for Role-Playing Games, or kyedrpg.com, which I started in 2022, August 2022. And as I was doing all this work, one of the lovely things, and I'm sure you all have encountered it as well, it's kind of that blue Honda phenomenon. It's like when you have a blue Honda, you start seeing blue Hondas everywhere. I started looking out there, asking about, and people started maybe thinking of me as that tabletop role-playing game education guy. It's like, you know what, I know someone that's doing this thing with weird-shaped dice. You might want to talk to him. And that led to the next person, which led to two more. And so I was very blessed, present tense, to have found so many stories, as I say, up the hallway and up the highway, which to me gives real relevancy and context to our friends specifically. I do have stories and certainly share and have articles that are outside of Kentucky, but I think there's something really powerful about the fact that people who are Kentucky educators can be like, well, this isn't something that's so far-flung and far-fetched that only these California teachers or these New York teachers are doing it. It's literally maybe the district next door. And so I've been really blessed and fortunate to collect so many of their stories across the spectrum of how they might be able to implement tabletop role-playing games in education. And by doing that and creating those collections, really the next natural step was, man, I'm doing a lot of work for basically a free website. Maybe there's a book in it, and it certainly has novelty. I again am a digital learning person by trade, but I think that in the time that our podcast has started, about 5 more AI books have been published. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot in that area. So this might have been an area that was unique, and I was right. There wasn't tons at the time that I certainly, especially when I pitched it. And yet there is literature. There's something published articles, books, essays, collections, some of which I used in research for my book. But and that led to the book that's coming out.
Yeah, I'm on your site now, KY Ed RPG, the Google site, and I'm looking
.com.
at .com, all the sites, and we'll put this in the show notes. All the YouTube links and the other articles you have linked here under resources. This is just a great, including Maryanne's in one of these.
You are Maryanne a couple of ways. There's
Yeah,
one of your major websites from way back, and then I think last year you had an article in the International Journal for Role Playing.
Yeah, I've had a couple articles in
Yeah.
there, but yeah.
So,
Right.
yeah.
And I mean, that's part of why I'm so excited about this book, because the intention with the article that I wrote where I interviewed teachers was
Yes.
really the same kind of idea that you were having. And so to see a whole book written about this is like incredible. And I think with that word nascent is really true, right? That we're just getting there. We know that role-playing games with therapy is sort of maybe like 10 years ahead of us, 8 years ahead of us in terms of the amount of work that they've done on research and establishing, groups that have done some of this like white paper work, and all of that's really great. And so to start to see people taking this seriously and writing books about it and collecting people's stories and starting to create a body of literature is an incredible gift, and it's so exciting.
Well, I think, yeah, go ahead. No, ask your question. I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead, because I'm going to change the subject a little.
Okay. Well, all I add to that as an asterisk, yes, and to all of those things is one of the things that I've discovered, and it's not terribly revelatory or shocking or controversial, is this: that if you're trying to do something transformative, if you're trying to do deeper learning, or as Kentucky we call it vibrant learning, that's kind of our phrase for it. One of the things, whether it's tabletop role-playing games as an educational pedagogy or something else, is that really you should always have a grounding in the basics and the fundamentals. And a couple of ways I would say that is, one is it has academic objective and rigor, right? It's school. So it's very important that it's not playing games for game's sake, or it's not stop, drop, and game, that it is for a purpose. That's what school's about. I want it to be fun and joyful, but I recognize that between instructional hours, as opposed to a club, it's important that you meet some academic objectives. I will also argue, as I do in the book, you're always learning. So even if it's an extracurricular club and it's just playing tabletop role-playing game, name insert here, you're still learning. But that argument aside, it's super important that it's grounded in rigor, in academic rigor. And the second thing is that it's in all the best practice. You can't, you have some unique challenges when you're doing some tabletop role-playing games in the classroom, some of which my frameworks try to address and help with that. But the idea of it is, at the end of the day, if you have classroom management that's shaky, or you don't have relationships built with students, there's nothing that's a silver bullet, especially this. So you have to have those things in there, in addition to building onto it something that's transformative. It's not like this makes all the ills go away. Gosh, I had no classroom management ability, and suddenly games brought it all together. It would be very rare, if not impossible, for things like that to happen. So that's also just the practical part of it. It's that it can be a powerful tool, but it is a tool. It's playing a tabletop role-playing game to, where's your preposition? To, for, the durable skills you're shooting for, some social, emotional learning that you're building, etc.
Definitely. We use the term form follows function, right? Like we only use a tabletop role-playing game if it's going to teach the things we want to teach, and the form of that tabletop role-playing game needs to be in a way that services the learning, not shoehorned in there just because we like to do it.
And that's the last thing, and the first thing I often say in PD and stuff that I lead about this subject is, if I'm actually probably shocked that I've had as many people. I have a colleague, Callie Colley from the Kentucky Department of Education, and we've done several series in the region about tabletop role playing games and education. And I'm always thrilled and excited, but to be honest, sometimes surprised by how many people come because I recognize one of the first things, and they say it, that makes them have some anxiety about this as a subject is I haven't read like 150 pages of a player's handbook. Is that okay? And that goes right to what you said, Maryanne. I love it because what it is it's not about memorizing the mechanics of any particular system or certainly memorizing 400 pages worth of rule books. It's taking perhaps aspects of that you can simplify down to your needs. What are your needs? And if I'm doing this for one day on a Thursday, your energy output to memorize 700 pages worth of rules is probably not a good use of your time. If I'm doing a whole year's worth of it, let's have a conversation about what you could learn from that. But um, so yes, once again, it's not you're not gaming to game. The game and the objective. There's no academic standard in any part of the United States yet that says, Dungeons and Dragons to fidelity. No, that's not going to show up. Not yet. I mean, give it a few years. We'll see. But
Like the common curriculum.
in the
Yeah.
common curriculum, yeah.
Did
Sorry.
you get
Well,
your TTRPG credit?
and with D&D in particular, right? Don't at me, Wizards of the Coast, but it has so much of its own lore and gravitas, and the amount of time it takes to learn a game like Dungeons and Dragons to fidelity, or in any kind of way that will allow you to really understand how to play it in a meaningful way, uh, is both the greatest blessing and greatest curse of it for educational purposes in terms of in a club setting or for kids on their own, right? Garrett talks about being there and reading these books on his own, and that changing the way that he read and thought about reading, and like that's incredible for on your own or in a club space. But when I've got to get through you know the next piece of curriculum in the next 15 days, I can't spend 10 of those days teaching you how to be, an evocation wizard. Like it's
If
just
only.
not,
Yeah.
and
But
right, unless so there is that piece of role-playing games being in service to the learning that has to be done. And to make that happen, there has to be some learning of how to play the game, but that can't overshadow. Ultimately, that has to then translate into it being a better and more effective learning later. Otherwise, what's the point of doing this?
1,000%.
Yeah,
And no matter how simple the mechanic may be, um, always grounding it in the service. I mean, chess. Chess is a game that, in theory, you move the horse and an L. You could probably learn the moves of chess in less than 5 minutes and take a lifetime to master it, and still not if you're lucky, right?
right.
Um, there is a lot that you can say about the critical thinking and challenges and things like that go through a mind of a chess player, and yet just plopping a chessboard down and watching, all the masters and the different moves and the approaches again for what, right? Even if you play chess, are you just playing chess that day? Or are you playing chess to dot dot dot? So yes, the system can be very simple or complicated. It can have a lot of lore, decades and hundreds of years of history, or something that the teacher made up on the spot within 5 minutes. It's the bottom line at the end of the day is letting the mechanics not dictate to you. The you should be dictating to the mechanics. What's its
Mm,
purpose?
yeah, 100%.
there's a there's a great book that was written that I've referred to in a couple of their podcasts called Games Agency as Art, and it comes out of a
Hmm.
philosophical kind of line of inquiry. But he looks at the author Newen looks at this idea of who did an interview with Ezra Klein actually on the Ezra Klein podcast, who
Wow.
talks about how he's big into like gamification, which is in my estimation a little bit of a dirty word. I'm not big on gamification. I
Hmm.
prefer game-based learning or play-based learning. But they talk about, what we reward the students with in a game, what the points are, or what they're actually doing for us in applied spaces needs to be what the outcomes are, like what our
For
target
sure.
learning objectives are. So the issue with like translating whole hog fifth edition or some of these D&D modules maybe we know and love into the classroom can be it's just very challenging and students aren't actually doing a lot of perhaps what we really want them to be doing. So a lot of interested educators come at it with, I really want to run TTRPGs with my students. That's one type of educator we work with. We also find people who have heard of it and they want to learn more about it, and those
Yeah.
are sort of a little easier to work with actually, versus
Yeah.
somebody then like, I really want to run this game because I love it, and we say, wait, let's take a look.
Well,
Um,
right. I mean, that's how I came to TTRPGs, was as an educator, right? And people have heard me, like, need my whole backstory. But really, like, I came to TTRPGs through hearing a panel at PAX Unplugged that was about how it's important for girls, like how it can be really important for middle school girls to do something like a TTRPG together. And I was like, yeah, I could do.
As a father of two daughters, I
Mm-hmm.
commend that idea. Yes.
Yeah. And so and that idea, so I was able to approach it as an adult with like professional goals, who also is like a theater nerd, right? And so I do think there's like a emotional piece. People who use TTRPGs as learning, I think the most of them have enough experience, either directly or indirectly, with using these kind of games and having it feel transformative or important to them, that it's worth the effort, right? Like there's something that makes you pick this up and say, this is going to be better than a Blooket, or like, or like vocabulary Jeopardy. But also then having that separation of saying, being able to really zoom out from your childhood experience and say, well, what were the pieces? What is the minimum amount I need to do to recreate the emotional feeling of this and get
I
those
love, can I just
additional
say,
values?
I love that phrase. What is the minimum amount? And even recognizing and actually asking that question out loud makes you recognize, if you come to this with TTRPG passion, like what is the part, what you're so excited about it, but why is a great reflective question, because then that brings you into in a pedagogical instructional space of how can I replicate that at a minimum level when I have a 50-minute period in secondary school, et cetera, et cetera, et
Right.
cetera. I love that. That's great.
Well, Adam, tell us a little bit. I want to get into your book, the content, the
Mm,
meat of your book a little more.
Okay.
And I guess I'll give you, maybe I'll give you an option A or option B, and maybe we'll get to both of these. We'll do a little choose your
Choose
own,
your own adventure. Yes,
I love
yes.
fork in
that.
the road. Well, I guess one would be, tell us how you got into TTRPGs. Like, is there a story you want to tell? Like, maybe even particularly in the classroom,
Yes.
or outside of that? Like, is there a case study that like you saw the transformational power for your students? And then the other option would be, and maybe this is a second question. That's up
Yes.
to you. Tell us about one of these frameworks you mentioned. Some of the content you developed to make this a little more accessible for educators.
I would happily do both. I'd love to start with the story, which
I
I,
love
by the
that.
way, if the thing that I say often, because it's so frequent, I'm sure you two are in elevators all the time, and there's that moment of awkward silence, and the person quickly whip pans to you and says, "Explain TTRPGs in 30 seconds," because I have, from here to the fifth floor. So what I often say is that if there are things we talk about in the professional development that I help facilitate. We go through an exercise of what's the difference between that and a board game and all that stuff. But really, distilled, it's a co-created story. And if it has the opportunity to create through role immersion a sense of empathy and understanding and perspective taking, great. Okay, so to answer your first question, how? I will tell you briefly that I am of the same age of Dungeons and Dragons within a month. They came out in January of 1974, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, little boxes, 1,000 of them. I came out as one package in February of 1974. So we were very close in age, meaning that I was also the perfect age in the 80s and the golden era of role playing games to play. And so I came to TSR through a game called Star Frontiers. And then next was kind of like that was my gateway tabletop role playing game. And then from there, the floodgates opened and Dungeons and Dragons and all the others. When I played those games, I realized there was a richness of imagination that just really drew to me. I suppose I've always enjoyed reading and cinema and even writing at an early age. So imagination was always key. But there was just something interesting about, the perfect Venn diagram of those multiple things often seemed to be a tabletop role playing game in its best form. So I played, bought a lot of boxes, a lot of rule books. Then I got older, and a lot of those went into bins. Time passes. And then I knew I wanted to be an educator also at a fairly early age, and eventually became an educator. So I felt like there was just this thing, like, you remember those, that really brought you joy. It kind of goes back to Maryanne's points. Like, what are the parts? If you distill it down, what was those elements? And there was a little fun, a little joy, a little immersion, a pretend game, but with some structures, not just free form, like let's just run around. So I will tell you one example that I did in the classroom with a group of students. So sophomore age is a tough high school age of high school to teach. They're kind of coming out of middle school. They're not quite juniors and seniors. So we have at the time, you have some of those classic, dare I say, canon books that were often, you didn't want to just teach the book, and yet you had a class set of books, and they were often brought in a classroom experience. One of them was Lord of the Flies. So I remember thinking about this, and I'd done it once or twice as far as teaching, a unit around the book, and I was like, well, what can I do differently? How can I kick it off better? So, and I talk about this in the book, I did a thing where when students walked in that day, I had playing in the background this ambient noise of an airport. And so, what's going on here? And then on the screen, there was a projected screen of like an outline of an airplane with a seating chart. Because as they walked in, they got this ticket, like, please sit down. And so, okay, different seats. So they sat down. I had acted very mysterious about it. Then everyone was in. And I was like, okay, do we have everybody? Okay, we're going to seal the cockpit. And so I closed the door. And then I go up and I hit another button, and there becomes the pilot, thank you for flying Golding Airlines. We are, 15,000 foot. If you took to the left, you see a beautiful island. And by the way, while I'm doing this, I have a Krispy Kreme hat on to represent me as a flight attendant, and I'm doing the, exit rows and all those things. And then suddenly the pilot seems concerned. He kind of goes off mic for a second, and then there's an alarm sound, ding, 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 mayday, mayday, we're going down. And then the lights go dark, and the lights come back up. And we've crash landed. And on this island, you're going to only have the things you have in your pockets. Stand up, let's go. Your tickets are going to tell you that you're in group A, B, C, or D. I gave them a packet. And it was a simulation. Now, there wasn't any dice that was rolled, but it showed, and the kids, had a good schema of like, what would it be like to be survival? What are some of the big rock themes that we're going to be talking and discussing through this book, and so on and so forth. The packet, it should be noted, there was a package of like an activity, something I'd probably downloaded off the internet. So I didn't come up with that. I had tweaked it, I added to it. The idea, though, is that I felt like that was just kind of dry without the emotion and the energy and the drama and the theater. And so the Sturm and Drang of it, as it were. So doing that gave them that sense of immersion of play, made them realize creatively, like, man, I mean, if I just had what was in my pockets, I have a pencil, and some of them had a phone. This is a little bit pre everyone had a phone days. And so, but what would that phone mean? This device that they really enjoyed, only had so much battery life, and then it would be as good as a rock at that point, right? So it just, the idea of it and the gamified, to coin that phrase, the simulation of it was something that I saw really powerful, and I thought, how can I do more? But I'd only done touches and pieces of it before I left the classroom. It's just an idea that stuck with me. So if I can, I'll pivot to the second question, which is the frameworks. So one of the things I recognized as I was starting to analyze and hear stories, and then think of ways of how can I create opportunities and entry points for others, is two frameworks that are shown in the book. The one is called the depth of infusion. And that just recognizes that there's 4 different types that I categorized it as. One would be adjacent, which is outside the classroom. That's all your extracurricular stuff, all those opportunities. And I've found in my talking and meeting with people, everyone that did things from recess to obviously after school and other examples. And then the other 3 levels is elemental, which is like an aspect, like maybe doing a character sheet activity, but not a full game. Episodic, which is there's a beginning and an end. Might take 1 or 2 or 3 days, depending on your instructional setup and how much time you invested, but it has a kind of finite one shot, as we would call it in tabletop role-playing games. And then there's full infusion, which I wouldn't have believed was a dream until I met some people that even in Kentucky early on that starts their school course year with rolling up a character and does things with it. Much less other stories that I found and read, as a research. So there's your infusion, and it's just kind of like pick an entry point, and you maybe swim laps. And by the way, frameworks beget frameworks, but um, say what you will about SAMR, SAMR, that framework for digital learning. There's certainly there are challenges and issues with it, and it's not perfect. But the thing that I found that's been enduring about it is that it's 4 letters and it's simple, and it gives you kind of an avenue of I'm on this side or that side of the fence. Where could I jump in? Where am I at? Where would I want to be? It gives you at least a little bit of language, enough to get you started. And that's the simplicity and beauty of SAMR, whereas there's other things that are probably deeper or more refined or more evaluative, but something like a SAMR works. And that's kind of informing the framework of that. The other framework that's really super important is the degree of facilitation. So when you're looking at your situation, knowing that a tabletop role-playing game is typically 1 game master, 4 to 6 players, how do you do that? That's a stumbling block. And again, I've found many different versions under the sun as far as how people have approached that. Remember the elemental where I'm doing a character sheet activity? So the first of those degrees of facilitation is there isn't one. None. There isn't one. There isn't a GM necessary because there isn't a game. So that's easy. But outside of that, what are other choices? So that goes from everything from an auto system, what I call auto GM, to teacher-led to student-led. And there's, of course, a degree of complexity in order to get to the point where you have students capable that maybe you can small group, 4 or 5 groups within a classroom led by students is obviously kind of an ideal. But again, I've seen it happen. I've read it happen, and there are, ways. So, yeah. So that's kind of the two frameworks, the depth of infusion and the degree of facilitation.
Lovely. Yeah, yeah. Oh, we're going to be referring to this all the time, and in some of our future work as well. This is great. Yeah, because we do sometimes take a lot of time to spell out some of these ideas, and people who are new to it don't. We need some common language. So that's fantastic.
I think that piece, the facilitation piece is very, very challenging for a lot of teachers, especially teachers that are used to a teacher-centric classroom and students who are used to a teacher-centric classroom. It's very hard to then think, well, what? They're going to be in groups doing things that are different from each other, and not everyone in the same group is doing the same thing. And maybe
At
when
the
they
same
hand
time,
things in, there'll be different things, right? How would I know?
yeah.
But there is, I make fun of that a little, but there is a legitimacy to that of, right, it is not realistic to ask 28 kids to all play together in one game without any group work.
But let's pause for a second because what you said, Maryanne, is so powerful. And it goes full circle back to the beginning of our conversation today.
Yeah.
If we look at a traditional instructional model, and that is what we're trying to graft on this tabletop role-playing game thing, it'll never fit because
Right.
of the problems with the system. What you just described is the exact problem of what the game of school has been for decades.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yes.
game of school for decades is I have 1 GM and 28 players, and we're all doing the same thing at the same time. And this is going to work out beautifully. Right?
We're not multi-classing here.
Right. And that's another thing. Where's the strengths of the party? Where's the strengths of different people that bring different things to the table, different interests, different. So, by addressing the situation of you have to find a degree of facilitation that's going to work for and it may be for that day or that week. It's
Yeah.
flexible, right? It's not make a decision and you're stuck with that for 8 or 9 months. But the same struggle of determining that for a tabletop role-playing game infused pedagogy, I call it polyhedral pedagogy in the book,
Love that.
is the exact same problem that you have to crack regardless. Because to go from a traditional to a transformative environment, you have to find the way of, okay, from big group to small groups, and ultimately maybe individuals. How is that system going to work unless we change things up and find ways to do that? The game takes the GM mastering, the game mastering part of it, and you're trying to solve that particular question. But it's really a much bigger question in education, which is, you're right. There's more of them than you. So, and they have brilliant, beautiful minds and things that are sitting there just waiting to be tapped into. And not every day, every minute. I recognize that we have to be practical here. But if we don't recognize that and pull those strengths in, then we're never going to get past this rut that we're in with traditional instruction in school today. And
Yeah.
there's my soapbox moment.
Well, no, I agree with this wholeheartedly. I mean, this is one of the areas of TTRPGs and teaching and learning that I can't let go of, and that gets me excited, like keeps me motivated about it again and again, is that at its heart, it's deeply progressive and it's disruptive, and it sort of challenges traditional schooling in a really productive way to flip the script. You know, one of the ways we've talked about this in a long time with technology and education is the sage on the stage and the teacher-centric models that we've inherited, and how I worked with Apple for a while and some other groups. You know, their models are using SAMR is to make it more student centered, and that actually means, when we really embrace it wholeheartedly, is letting them lead a little bit or a
Yeah.
lot, and having that personalized approach to learning. TTRPGs as its own sort of coherent system do this organically. They're inherently
Yes.
democratic. They're inherently,
I use the word agentic a lot. That's
yeah,
it creates
Mhm.
agency.
it's empowering.
Hmm.
And good old John Dewey would love this stuff, right? Foundations of Teaching and
He would have
Learning.
been a good dungeon master, that one, John
For
Dewey. I
real.
think you're right.
Yeah, or a great player, you know, or a
At
real, I don't
both.
know, maybe a real troll, I don't know. But
Well,
you'd be,
I think the additional piece that we haven't talked about in terms of learning is so much of the learning that kids are doing is really in its own bubble and doesn't feel important to them. And, I teach middle schoolers, and middle schoolers are very short-sighted developmentally, as they should be, that their developmental work is happening now. And so, excuse me, I can say to the majority of them, well, you might need this someday, but I might as well be saying, you may need this, the moon. Yeah, I mean, you will need this never o'clock. And
I love it. Yeah.
the other piece, that, the fictional, our shared fiction, is that it creates an immediacy for the learning because there's an application for the learning. Right? That I need to
Yes.
learn whatever this is to survive on this fictional island now.
Yes. And can I
And
also go ahead?
well, just and so and it matters because I bought into this fictional story and there are emotional stakes to the story that matter to me. And it is not as emotionally maybe impactful as my real life, but it's a good close second, right? Because it's pretend play and we're enjoying that. But it's certainly more impactful, me being successful in getting this fire to start through whatever means, academic means necessary so that we don't all die here on this island, is more impactful than the time that my teacher gave me a C minus and then I never thought about it again.
Right. Or I
Right?
memorized plugged and chugged that formula that represents what
Exactly.
fire is, but what does that mean?
Right. Or
Yeah.
right or and then I never spoke of it again.
And then
And
there's
so then but we know that memorization and sort of brain connection is all based also on emotion. And so having that ability to have some sort of emotional impact will create a stronger bond with the learning in our brains. So it's kind of like win-win here.
well, yes. One of the things I think that's important, that's potential in a tabletop role playing game, and you could add other things too. Obviously, reading a story could watching a movie, etc. But you really have two options here. It's an option of you either have to bring that perspective to me or me to that perspective. In other
Mhm.
words, I have to figure out the connections I have to something that happened in 1842 or a character that lives in a mysterious land that's fantasy, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or by making me immersed in the role of, well, for the sake of this activity slash game, I will be said character or said whatever, said historical figure. Then I am forced to, through the game apparatus, to think about that perspective. And when Hopes at the end reflects and says, my perspective has shifted a little bit. Now that I walked or rolled, as it were, in those shoes for a minute, um, I think differently about that experience, that time, that person, that setting, that whatever it may be. But one of those two things have to happen. Come to me or I got to go to it.
Yeah.
So you either get pulled into it or it gets connected and tethered to you because you go, that reminds me of my grandfather. That reminds me of the time when I was really scared, trying to ride my bike for the first time. Whatever it is, it goes back to what you said, Maryanne, about emotions and things like that. And a good game that's safe to play, fun and enjoyable, thrilling, even perhaps in the best of ways. Any of those and all of those emotions are things that are going to connect it and center it and make it memorable. And that's what Kentucky talks about vibrant learning. It's memorable learning, right? It's memory
Well,
it's a learning that lasts.
and that reflective piece that you just mentioned, I wanted to make sure that we highlighted because I think that's something that we have an opportunity to really make part of the practice as educators, right? That reflective piece to helping build those connections in a conscious way and not just an unconscious way, right? I think sometimes some of those emotional connections we have with TTRPGs from when you're younger are some of those things, right? My perspective shifted. I then had this group of friends. I felt really great. But those aren't things that you necessarily understand when you're playing them unless there's a facilitated reflective piece until
Love
much
it.
later.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so one thing that we can do in a classroom that we don't necessarily do in our just sort of club play or casual play with friends is really making that reflective piece important. And that's part of how we show learning too, that in a way that's a more traditional school kind of way.
Agreed.
I would just add, besides reflective learning, a great piece to store all those reflections is in e-portfolios. And so this is my
There it
Yeah.
little,
is for the bingo card.
there's Garrett's bingo card. But
we've won. BINGO. Garrett,
yeah,
that's a great point, though. Like,
yeah.
do it and then a place to put it. I'm all
Neither
about,
Garrett
yeah.
nor I have mentioned two people so far. We're
Well,
going to see if we can make it all the way through
no,
this
I
podcast
can't. I
without
mean,
mentioning them.
It's
I
like
had
there's a secret password game or something going on. I'm
Mhm.
there
excited.
is.
Okay.
If you're
That's
following
awesome.
along, yeah. Well, the note I have here to mention is shared fantasy, which is a phrase Maryanne's been tipping around a little bit. So yeah, good old Gary Allen Fine.
Oh my gosh, we get double points when we make Garrett talk about Gary Allen Fine because
Oh my
he's my
God.
favorite guy.
Yeah.
He
No,
was
but
he was the first one, yes.
I mean, how powerful is it to have that shared fantasy, that shared story, not just to be a part of a story in a meaningful way? And educational content's been doing this forever, right? The story problems, the critical thinking problems in the back of the book. We know those work, but what we do with TTRPGs and teaching and learning is we really stretch that out over a longer period of time and really make it more rich and immersive. Uh, and then we make people really a deep and meaningful part of that story. So I just think it's like an evolution of what we've known for a while works well in education, and it also snaps into, I just have to make these connections for people out there. We're talking about using reflective learning for role play based games and learning. Then we're talking about capturing it in e-portfolios for like assessment and for social learning that we can use and digitize in electronic spaces. And then this snaps into this model called high impact practices. And we know things like common readings or common shared experiences, like
Mm.
everybody read a book together, everybody goes to a show together, everybody does service learning together, creates that kind of social presence between cohorts of students that
Mhm.
creates really powerful learning. So yeah, I just feel like TTRPGs, it's almost like you don't have to do all this design work, right? And this is what I get back from a lot of people who participate in these things is there's just you talk about so many aspects of these, it's kind of overwhelming. But the truth is, you don't have to meticulously design these things. A
Mm.
lot of it comes organically. And when we release a little bit of that control to students and we let them do a little bit of the storytelling and them do a little bit of the creativity, it kind of happens by itself. At least that's been my experience in writing
Yeah,
these.
there's a video that's viral, it's circulated around with like Deborah Ann Wool's with John Bernthal, and basically within 4 minutes, live and without actual physical dice, but talking through the narration of it, like in 4 minutes, you get D&D, right? Like, this is what D&D is. It's a story. You have ability checks, and you roll some dice, and you succeed or fail. What happens next? And um, the thing I want to add to that, which that's all the things you said, Garrett, so good. One of the things I would like to add is that in a world where we want to personalize and we want to create urgency, there's something that TTRPGs, it's very meta, but it's something that TTRPGs do magically and automatically and easily, which is the classic game master moment is second person and it's present tense. You walk into a field, and what do you do? I'm posed immediately, I'm immersed. It's you, it's second person, not this third person, abstract person, you. And I am asked to do a thing and I am asked to make a decision. And I do it, and then those results immediately applied, continue on and continue on and continue on. That's, in the best of TTRPG games and playing, that's what it is. It's me being asked to do something, although obviously in the guise of an avatar or character. And the urgency is the now. It's not in the the past tense, or you will walk into a field. Well, in the future, I guess when I do that, I will do something important then. No, you are. It's something I think about. And so at the end of the day, and that's something that I certainly emphasize with anyone reading the book, going to these facilities, listening to your all's podcast and webinar or two as well. Wherever it finds and inspires you to create some joyful vibrancy, to create some urgency in the way you're instructing, to personalize, to lean in and pull out the strengths of your students, all of them, who all deserve that, who are aching for that. They're aching for connection in a world post-pandemic where we just don't. And so a world where we can be productive and collaborative, and we need each other. The only way we're going to survive this simulation is with each other, but really it's this big blue beautiful planet of ours, is we need each other. That at its heart is what tabletop role-playing games in an education environment is uplifting. Pick a piece of that, I'm happy, right? It doesn't even have to be rolling polyhedral dice, although polyhedral dice is so fun. That's the most important thing. Everything else is the gravy that I'm glad to help and facilitate and provide frameworks for. But if you achieve that, that's the goal.
Oh, beautiful. Well said. How wonderful, and what an exciting book. We are looking forward to this coming out. We're going to have to get our hands on it and share it. I want to keep riffing. What you've said, I want to keep talking about, hope and young people, and maybe why people are gravitating to TTRPGs now so much, because it's an odd space right now, and in a world where young people, I've been told, feel kind of hopeless. Maybe TTRPGs offer that. And I want to keep riffing on Sammer and the connections between TTRPGs and education technology. But I know we have a hard stop here at the end of our time here. Any other thoughts or comments we wanna end on?
Maryanne, back to you. Any
Um,
last questions for you, or
no, I mean, this is
points
great.
to make?
And I definitely want to talk more about everything. I can't wait to read your book. It's gonna be awesome.
Well, we could always do a part two. Maybe in a month or two or three, we can talk. And I
That'd
want to
be
learn
really
from
fun.
you all. Obviously, I know I'm the guest today, and so I was kind of the centerpiece for that. But I know that you all have done some work. You all have
Yeah.
recently just published a thing, which I discovered
Well,
late in my process. Yeah.
this is a very exciting day for us, actually, because Garrett shipped out almost all of the books on Saturday, the physical books. And so this
Congratulations. That's
morning,
awesome.
in the middle of my second parent-teacher conference today, because it's parent-teacher conference day here in New Hampshire,
Love it.
my phone dinged, and there was a picture of my dad holding the book. I haven't
Oh,
even
that's a
gotten to
proud
see it.
moment.
I haven't even gotten a physical copy yet, but somehow it went from Ohio to Temple, New Hampshire in record time. So
How?
it must
How
have
did
just been a series of
I literally had those books. It was about 800 books. I rented a U-Haul truck. I drove it to Akron. I backed it up to this like giant USPS facility. Very difficult. It was a labyrinth. Took me 3 hours to figure this out. And by like 3 p.m., I'm driving home. So I don't know how from Saturday
well,
at 3
so
p.m.
somehow it
you
must
got.
have just hooked up onto the right car at the right time. So it's a
Love it.
very exciting day for us too, because this is the fulfillment of something that's taken over going
Yeah.
on 2 years to think about. And so it's been
I know
very
the
exciting.
feeling. Yeah. Oh, I'm excited to read your book. Is what
Yeah.
is the bottom line. I want to
Um,
make sure that's plugged for the sake of all the listeners and viewers right now. Is that
but
there's that as well.
and Kentucky's not that far away from Ohio, and we're gonna be very busy at Origins in June.
I've been to Gen
Columbus.
Con, I've been to Gamma Expo, I've not been to Origins, but obviously some of the same people and organizations apply. So, okay,
Yeah,
fair.
so we'll maybe we'll see you there. So
Yes.
The challenge accepted. We'll see
and
what we
anyone
can do,
who's
maybe.
listening, we want to see you there too. It's in June. You still have a lot of time, but there's going to be a lot of good work from us and friends of ours, people in the space. It's very exciting. It's going to be a bunch of stuff
Absolutely.
about using games for education there. For sure.
TRPGs and teaching and learning, we're just getting started. We're going to take
Mhm.
it from nascent to next level.
This is just the first edition, everybody.
Yeah.
We're just 1E.
Yes,
You just
one
wait.
E. I love it.
Well, one more time, Adam Watson, thank you so much for joining us. Tabletop role-playing games in the classroom, infusing gameplay into K-12 instruction, coming out before the end of the year here. Watch out for that. Uh,
Absolutely.
and we'll see all you guys on the next edition of the Tabletop EDU podcast. Thank you.
Sounds awesome. Thank you,
Thank
Adam.
you
Thank you,
all.
Garrett. Bye.
Thank y'all. Thank you for having me.